into the FAA's program. They actually came out with a directive to white, and we want the people that are competent.
How you can come to the conclusion right now that diversity had something to do with this crash?
Because I have common sense.
Pointing fingers at his Democratic predecessors for policies which have been in place since 2013 and were active during the entirety of the first Trump administration. NBC's Peter Alexander confronted him with that reality at that press conference yesterday. Watch.
The implication that this policy is new or that it stems from efforts that began under President Biden or the Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is demonstrably false. It's been on the FAA's
Who said
website.
That, you?
No, it's on the website, the FAA's website. It was there in 2013. It was there for the entirety.
What I read.
It was there for the entirety of your administration
nice
too. So my question is, why didn't you change the policy during your first administration?
I did change it. I changed the Obama policy, and we had a very good policy. And then Biden came in and he changed it. And then when I came in 2 days, 3 days ago, I signed a new order bringing it to the highest level of intelligence.
He also partly blamed his predecessor's initiatives to hire people with disabilities. But take a look at this. It's an FAA bulletin from more than 2 years into Trump's first presidency, highlighting its pilot program to help prepare people with disabilities for careers in air traffic operations. President Trump's comments yesterday faced swift backlash, the NAACP calling those remarks unpresidential, divisive behavior, adding that the president was using the highest office in the land to sow hatred rooted in falsehoods. The American Association of People with Disabilities writing in this post, FAA employees with disabilities did not cause last night's tragic plane crash. It is extremely inappropriate for the president to use this tragedy to push an anti-diversity hiring agenda. Let's turn to NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor. Yamiche, Trump's doubling down on these baseless claims just this morning. Walk us through it.
That's right. President Trump and his allies continue to double down on the idea that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs had anything to do with this sad and tragic collision that happened in D.C. The president was posting just this morning saying this. This is just one reason why our country was going to hell, his words. He posted not only comments from himself, but also comments from his allies like Elon Musk and headlines from the New York Post targeting diversity and equity inclusion programs, criticizing them. We should just note that there is no evidence that diversity had anything to do with this collision as of now. We should also note that the NTSB is the only agency that is authorized to release information about the cause of this collision. That being said, the president, as you noted, when was pushed on the idea of why he came to this conclusion, said it was because of, quote, common sense. And we've seen a lot of pushback to this, the NAACP, as you said, but also Pete Buttigieg, who was named specifically by President Trump, said that this was despicable for him to use this. But this is, of course, all part of President Trump's sort of brand of politics, in that he talked about targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion while he was on the campaign trail, and has made it a key part of his administration in the first few weeks here. Anna.
All right, Yamiche Alcindor, thanks for just bringing us the latest comments and putting it all in context for us. Joining us now is former Homeland Security Secretary Janet Napolitano. Thanks for joining us. Secretary Napolitano, first, I just want to get your reaction, your response to some of that finger-pointing we heard from the president after this tragedy.
Well, it's unpresidential. He's making unfounded claims before there's been any factual investigation, and he's doing so in such a way to foster his own political ideology, but also to further divide Americans. And in a time of tragedy like this air crash, and it is a tragedy, and we need to keep in mind that there are dozens and dozens of families and friends of those who were killed, and we need to keep them in our hearts and in our prayers. But instead of bringing us together and saying, we're going to get to the bottom of this, we're going to find out what happened, and then we're going to take action to prevent it from happening again, what do we get? Some DEI palaver. It really is unpresidential.
And here was Trump's response when he was asked if he plans to visit the crash site, which is typical when it comes to a natural or an accident that has caused such a tragic moment for this country. Listen.
I have a plan to visit, not the site, because You tell me, what's the site? The water?
Or to meet with the first responders down there?
I don't have a plan to do that.
You want me to go swimming? He asks. Secretary Napolitano, why is it important for presidents to show up to sites of tragedies like this?
Because presidents are our elected leaders, and by physically going to a site, by showing that they care, by demonstrating some empathy with those who have been hurt by a tragedy such as this air crash, they help give us confidence. Is there anything that President Trump has done in the last 2 days with respect to this air crash that has given anybody confidence? No, not at all. And that, to me, is its own tragedy.
President Trump still harping on the DEI policies this morning, as Yamiche brought us. When you see this administration rolling back diversity initiatives and using DEI as a catch-all culprit for various problems, does that track with the reality you saw when you were ahead of a massive department?
No. And part of it is that DEI has become a catchphrase for anything bad. If anything is bad, it's DEI. A helicopter hits a plane going down the Potomac River. Oh, well, that must be DEI. I think the president has a habit of latching on to a few things, and then he just repeats them and repeats them and repeats them. And of course, as we know, repetitiveness leads many people to believe him, which is its own problem. But a diverse workforce, all that means is that you're drawing from the strength of all Americans to work in the government, to work in the public service. I don't know what's wrong with that.
And in business, for example, there are plenty of data points to show that businesses with more diversity are more successful. But let's move on, because I want to use your expertise while I have you as a former DHS secretary. And I want to talk about immigration. A lot of moves we've seen in these early days of the Trump administrations. In fact, just in the first days of these mass arrests, we know hundreds and hundreds of immigrants with no criminal record have been swept up in the operations. What's your reaction to the approach we're seeing?
Well, it was to be anticipated. I think this is one area where they broadcast quite clearly what they intended to do with respect to immigration enforcement, and now we're seeing the reality of that on the ground. And you're right, they've made, and Tom Homan, the so-called border czar, has said repeatedly they're going to focus on serious criminals who are also in the country illegally. That's fine. That was the policy under President Obama. It was the policy under President Biden, and there's always more that can be done in that regard. But in their efforts, they are just to make the numbers that they are striving to make. They are going to be picking up many, many people who, granted, are in the country in undocumented status, but many have been here for years. They have families here. They have jobs here. They have roots in their communities here, and they're going to be swept up too. Now, there's going to be a lot of visuals to go along with this, and we've already seen that. We saw the visual they put out of a line of Guatemalans who had just been captured at the border, being loaded onto a military plane and sent back to Guatemala. One can ask over time, is that the best use of our military resources? But realize there were 70 or 80 Guatemalans in that line. The typical CBP flight has about 150. So, you have to wonder. But it's a great visual, and it goes all over, and people say, yeah, we're doing something. Yeah, okay.
Just on the use of the military flights, it was notable to me, Reuters is reporting that those flights could cost more than 5 times per person a first-class ticket on a commercial flight could cost. While I have you, too, what's your thought on the Guantanamo Bay plan, the plan to use Guantanamo as a potential migrant detention facility?
Yeah, I have a lot of questions about that, and I think a lot of questions need to be asked. First of all, in terms of making the facilities habitable at Guantanamo. I mean, there were holding beds there for Cuban refugees years ago and so forth, but they've fallen into great disuse. So there's going to have to be some real investment there to make it habitable. You're going to have to move a lot of people down there. You need guards. You need people to do cooking and catering. You need healthcare. So that all has to be set up. But the fundamental question is, well, who is going to be sent there? Is it only going to be those who have completed a criminal sentence in the United States and they're being held there because their country of origin won't take them back? If so, well, then how long will they be held there? Will be held there in perpetuity? What about women and children and families? Will they also be held there? Will there be a separate facility for women versus men? There are real logistical challenges to putting Guantanamo in play like this.